All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January 2021 meeting of the West County Democrats. My name's Suzanne Couch. I am your co-chair. And today we're going to vary a little bit from our normal process because we have two very significant things going on. Our speaker, Elad Gross, will be speaking to us later on in the meeting. But before that happens, we are going to ask you if you have questions or comments to make about anything that's been going on politically. Glenn Koenen is here, and he will be answering those questions. If you look on your computer, you have a chat room. Please go to the chat room and type in your question. And when we are finished with the business meeting, Karen will be taking those questions and giving them to Glenn. All right. First off, we're just very quickly going to do our processes. Gay, do you want to give the membership report?
Yes. So far, we have 49 people who've paid their 2021 dues. Again, it's been a little more difficult because we're not meeting in person, but you can send your $20 check to West County Dems, P.O. Box 31034, St. Louis, Missouri 63131.
Okay. All right. Okay, Jan, do you have the treasurer's report?
Yes, I do. Sorry. Okay. The treasurer's report for the month of December 2020. We started with a beginning balance of $5,354.73. We had revenue of $380 in membership dues. We had disbursements of $256 with our ending balance of $5,478.73. I am trying to get an Act Blue set up so you can pay online. We ran into a little glitch there, and you can also still pay through your bank if you pay your bills online. So we've had a couple of people do that. So thank you for any of the donations you've sent in already, or the membership dues.
All right, thank you. Just a comment, all of the officers that you see here and all the board members are staying over. We have not been able to have an election, and we are looking for volunteers to take board offices. We need a secretary, a co-president, a secretary, and we need board members. So if anyone has a nomination, please let us know. All right, now, Karen, are you ready? Karen?
Okay, I'm here.
All right. Do you want to start? Do you want to start with questions?
Okay, or do we want Glenn to do his report first?
Glenn, what's your choice?
I can go over the report rather quickly, then we can get to the questions.
Okay.
And folks, we'll be putting the report on the website, so if you want more detail. But I'm going to start, as I usually do, with a scary number. From a poll that was done and released on January 7th, 45% of all Republicans approved the storming of the Capitol to defend Donald Trump's election victory. 45% of Republicans in a poll defended storming the Capitol. That's where we are. The good news is things will get better. Joe Biden's going to have a Democratic House and Senate. He's going to be able to get some common sense and get things going right. The bad news is that Trump did a tremendous amount of damage at the top of the government and all through the departments. For example, a lot of EPA regulations are now gone. They'll have to be reinstated, which means new hearings and postings and things like that. A lot of mining and drilling concessions have been given out in places nobody wanted them to drill or mine, such as off the coast to the beaches, up in Alaska, and so on. Now that those concessions have been awarded, you can't pull them back because the federal government has made a contract with those companies and they get to exploit the resources that are there. The biggest problem we're going to have, though, the last two Republican presidents have tremendously increased the national debt while cutting government revenue. Right now, we are only able to afford our debt because interest rates are so low. If we had a situation, some of us here remember what happened back around 1980 when home interest rates went to like 14, 15%. And it was great, you were getting 15% on a CD. Well, if the federal government has to go from paying 1 and 2% on its debt to 5 or 6% on its debt, that's going to cause the government to either have to make tremendous cuts or raise revenue. The problem is we now have multiple generations of voters who don't believe the government needs more money. They've been told time and time again that the government has more than enough money. The problem is how the government spends the money. We've seen that at the state level and the national level. So it'd be really hard, even in a time of national emergency. Remember, George W. Bush did not do anything to pay for the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, and he got reelected. Now, here's something else we have to deal with. The majority of Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives. In Missouri, every single Republican rep except Ann Wagner signed on to saying all the votes from Arizona and Pennsylvania didn't count. Remember, the way those things were worded, they didn't say they weren't going to count the Democratic votes. They said they were going to throw out every single vote for president cast in Arizona and Pennsylvania. 6 Missouri representatives, over 130 nationwide. In fact, the majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives have gone on record as being against the idea of votes being counted. That's where the Republican Party is right now. And even though they had a bad week, it's going to take a long time, and you're going to see a lot of those Republicans not wanting to back down from the Trump position. As Trump's people said at that rally on Wednesday, in fact, I think it was Don Jr., it's no longer the Republican Party, it's Trump's party. And that's going to be true for a long time. On the state level, unfortunately, our Democrats remain as a super minority. We have the same number of Democrats as we had before. Of course, the Republicans really don't change their stripes very often. Among the legislation being proposed this year, again, right to work, additional restrictions on initiative petitions, expansion of charter schools is the biggie, guns everywhere in many forms is back, more tax cuts, and more reductions of local government authority. Basically, a small number of senators and state reps in the conservative caucus are going to run state government. They're the ones who are going to get their bills heard. They're the ones who are going to have Parsons' ear. They're the ones leadership's going to listen to. Among the things they're pushing, we used to have a crazy state representative named Rick Pratton. Now he's a crazy state senator. He proposed with Senate Bill 68 that under no circumstances could there be any restrictions on religious services. Keep in mind that during the 1918 pandemic in St. Louis and many other jurisdictions, they forbid the churches from holding services. And that's credited with being one of the things that helped contain the pandemic. Bratton's bill would make it illegal for any health department at the state level or the local level to put any restrictions at all on a church, even in a public health emergency. They would be completely exempt. They could say, we're going to have 5,000 people in the church, nobody's going to wear masks, we're all going to sing and dance and kiss each other. Under Bratton's bill, that'd be perfectly legal. Another 19th century idea they're pushing, one of the state reps from Portageville, Missouri, which is way out there, he is saying that Missouri should only allow paper ballots marked by hand and then manually counted. In other words, no vote tabulating machines, no electronic voting at all. Imagine how long it would take to get that general election ballot in St. Louis County, where you have the potential of 700,000 ballots. Imagine how long and how many teams, the Democrats and Republicans, having to do tally sheets on all those issues, how long it would take them to count the vote. The bad news is that's Don Roan from Portageville. The Roan proposal and the Bratton proposal seem to have strong support among Republicans. It is very possible, and I can't find anything that says you could not restrict an election authority from only doing manual counting. It is very possible that in 2022, in St. Louis County, in Jackson County, in St. Louis City, in Greene County, it may be 2 weeks before we get election results. Because imagine having to manually count a ballot with 50 or 60 items and then check it when you've got 700,000 or 200,000 of those. The worst of the conservative caucus, to my thinking, is Senator Bob Onder from St. Charles County. He's the one pushing the big restrictions on initiatives. If you've ever gathered signatures, you know that you need to get a pretty high threshold in Missouri. 8% of the people who voted in the previous gubernatorial election from the majority of the congressional districts have to sign up to get a petition on the ballot. 8% from 6 out of 8 districts. He wants to take that to 15% from every single congressional district, which would more than double the number of signatures you need. Also, there are proposals that it looks like the person taking your signature could not take my word that I'm Glenn Koenen. He would have to record the legal ID I showed to prove that I was Glenn Koenen when I signed the petition. It's a backdoor way of making it almost impossible to get any more petitions through because they don't like what's been happening with them. Also, he's pushing Senate Joint Resolution 6, which would put a hard cap on state revenue. And remember, the Hancock Amendment means that Missouri is collecting about $4 billion a year less in general revenue than it could under the old rules. But that's not a hard cap. That allows revenue to go up basically with inflation and natural growth. The Onder proposal would be a hard cap on state revenue. So that if, say, Missouri brought in $500 million more next year, the state would have to adjust the income tax to reduce its yield the following year by $500 million. What that does is it would guarantee a slow death spiral for all Missouri programs. And that kind of pushes in to what a number of them are pushing, which is charter schools everywhere, and a few of the more radical Republicans want to completely get rid of public education. They say that educating your kids is a parent's responsibility, not the state's. And their compromise is, well, the state will give you a little bit of money to pay for your homeschooling, to pay for a charter school, to pay for a parochial school, to pay for a private school. That is a very real movement within the Republican Party. We also have to remember our current governor has essentially gotten rid of all the unions and state government employees. He's basically gotten rid of the union with the corrections officers, the Department of Social Services, and so on. Now, and I've heard this from 3 different Democratic state reps at 2 different events, they feel the governor and his henchmen are going after the state teachers unions because those are the largest groups of unionized workers getting state money. The feeling is it would be a 2-pronged approach. First, they would decertify the union's ability to collect dues, and then they would say no teacher could have a joint contract. In other words, every teacher would have to negotiate with the superintendent and the school board for their individual contract. Of course, that means if you're a school board member's nephew, you might get a bigger raise than the person in the classroom next door. But those things are very real. And again, some of the Democrats I've talked to think there's a very big fear that that's going to be a major push this year. And having gotten rid of the unions for the corrections officers, the unions for the Department of Social Service workers, and so on, they can see that coming. This being Missouri, we have all sorts of craziness among the legislature. Mary Elizabeth Koenen, who has the state rep seat on the High Ridge, St. Louis County line, she wants to rename part of I-55 the Donald Trump Highway. Now, she announced that on Wednesday, which is bad timing, but don't think it's dead. It could happen. Also, Justin Hill is a state rep from Lake St. Louis. He's the one who, during the last special session, sponsored legislation to have Missouri go on record as saying, we believe Donald Trump had the election stolen from him. Justin Hill sponsored that resolution, and he backed it up. Rather than being sworn in on Jeff City on Wednesday, he was in Washington at the demonstration. He claims he didn't go in the Capitol, but we'll see what the FBI and facial recognition say about that. We're expecting the governor to send a budget to the legislature next week. It will be meaningless. 2 problems. One, with COVID and all the fallout, nobody really knows what's going to happen with state revenue. State revenue right now is actually a little bit rosy because some people paid their 2019 taxes in fiscal year 2021 because you didn't have to pay till after July 15th, which was in the next fiscal year. Also, there could be some federal money coming down the pipe. However, what appears more likely is that the legislature will pass whatever they want, and the governor will just withhold funds to make things work. Remember, it is the governor, under the state constitution, who is responsible for Missouri having a balanced budget. The governor just released about $128 million he withheld in July. It is very possible the legislature will come out in May and say, we passed a great budget. We're spending more money on schools. We're finding more money for roads and everything else. Then the governor will quietly withhold huge chunks of that money. There is also a little bit of talk about reshuffling the deck on how the individual school districts get their money. Right now, they get money for basic operations, for school books, for transportation, for special needs students, and so on. Do not be surprised if the budget language is used to reduce those numbers of categories. Transportation is a big thing outstate because some of these districts have kids on buses 2 hours a day. But transportation money has been cut and there's a lot of pushback. If all those funds were commingled and they only got one check, it'd be harder to complain about not getting as much transportation money as if it's a definite line item you've seen cut. So keep an eye out for that. Another thing, again, charter schools. Despite the fact that the teachers unions, the school boards, and most people who think about it realize charter schools are a bad idea. There is really big money and important people in this state who want to see a major expansion of charter schools. Remember, at first they were limited to St. Louis. Well, now we're talking about charter schools everywhere. That is going to be a big issue. Ironically, some of the people pushing hardest for charter schools are from the St. Louis area, where we already have a track record. And if you follow the newspapers, follow the reports, a couple of the charter schools do okay. None of them really do great. Many of them have been complete disasters for the kids and taxpayers. But again, the Republican ideology is that the charter schools are winning and that they are the wave of the future. That also ties into the people who want to get rid of the teachers' unions, because none of the charter schools have unionized teaching. So that's coming. During the pandemic, the Missouri Department of Social Services wound up closing down a lot of their offices because of safety and so on. Missouri's computer system does not allow a lot of these workers to work remotely. Remember, the Department of Revenue and big parts of the Department of Social Services still use COBOL-based programming from the 1970s to run their systems. And Missouri does not have the bandwidth to allow a lot of workers to download a lot of data. So as a result, during the pandemic, the number of people who should have gotten Medicaid, should have gotten food stamps and other aid, never got as high as it should have. They never got as high as it did during the 2008-2009 recession, even though we know that big segments of the economy were hit even worse this time. That becomes important because this coming year, the legislature has to implement Medicaid expansion. There's already talk of limiting the amount of money available from Medicaid, which would make it harder for people, even if they qualify, to get help. But also, administratively, if you have obsolete technology, too few staff, horrible systems, and the problems of the pandemic limiting access, we should go from about 1 million people on Medicaid to about 1.3 million. It is possible they may be able to limit the number of people getting Medicaid by a couple of 100,000 by putting up administrative roadblocks, by not having the infrastructure there, the staff, the forms, the computer systems to process them. Another thing is talking to a gentleman who's a physical therapist. He, as of last week, he was still waiting on payments for treatments he delivered to Medicaid patients in April. They can also make Medicaid very, very unattractive to healthcare organizations by taking 6 months to pay their bills. Especially if you're a rural doctor or pharmacy, physical therapist, you can't wait 6 months for your money when your hard costs are there every day. So we could see all sorts of tricks like that to limit the impact of Medicaid expansion, which Mike Parsons said he would endorse or he would implement, but he doesn't really like Medicaid expansion. So Suzanne, should we take questions on that part before I go into Holly?
Yes, we have about 14 minutes for questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
See here. The first question was, and it relates to everybody's least favorite junior senator from Missouri. Would it help to contact businesses that have financially contributed to Holly to let them know you will no longer support them?
It won't hurt. And if you were watching the news this morning, Commerce Bank, which through the Kemper family and their corporate PAC, has announced they're no longer making donations to politicians who supported the vote challenge. If we can cut them off with their money, that will help. The thing is, they're saying that today. Hawley doesn't come up for re-election for 4 more years. It's going to have to be a long-term effort to keep him from finding money. Remember, he's already lost Sam Fox, David Humphreys, and a number of other local contributors. But Hawley was never a Missouri boy. He was always the darling of the big money people in Washington and so on. So it is going to be harder to get to those secretive pacts and so on. And remember, Hawley's never had a job that paid more than $175,000 a year. But it turns out his house in Vienna, Virginia, is worth around $2 million. He has friends.
I think I know the answer to this one already. Have there been any repercussions directed at Justin Hill for taking part in the riot at the Capitol?
He has been condemned on editorial pages, but it appears as if when he shows up today in Jeff City for this week's session, he's going to be sworn in for the term. It looks like he's going to get off scot-free. You can recall a state rep in Missouri, but he's in the same territory as the conservative caucus people out there in western St. Charles County. It's very doubtful you could get a recall petition to get any traction out there. And this, again, is not the first time. He sponsored the resolution to have Missouri proclaim that it didn't believe the election results. And he's been on the conservative caucus's, hit parade for the last couple of years.
Isn't he responsible for Rudy Giuliani testifying or whatever it was he did with the Missouri legislature?
He arranged Rudy Giuliani's Zoom testimony. By the way, that was the first time in the history of Missouri anyone was ever allowed to testify remotely. The rule has always been you have to show up at the Capitol, sit in the room, and testify in person. Sarah Unsinger pointed out that there's a proposal to allow mere mortals to testify remotely via Zoom, but that's in the Rules Committee, the proposed legislation. Nobody knows if that's going to get traction or if that's going to be a special thing just for Rudy.
Next question. Do you think that other GOP candidates will want their votes counted manually, therefore delaying their own election process? I can't imagine people in the Metro St. Louis area, even Republicans, wanting to have a 2-week lag to know if you win or lose.
The thing is not what makes common sense. Trump told everybody that votes were stolen by voting machines, the scanners. Even though they're the same type of optical scanners used to grade, all the tests, the ACT and everything else. The belief, the common knowledge within the Republican Party now is that machines can't be trusted. Machines can be manipulated by Hugo Chavez's ghost from Venezuela, by technicians in China, even though the machines have no Chinese components. Because of that, they may see this as having to give the trumpets something. Say, okay, we're going to make sure nobody steals a vote in Missouri. Every vote's going to be on a piece of paper with a box filled in ink and then manually counted by 2 people. And it'll happen, and they'll wonder why it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get results out of St. Louis City, St. Louis County, Jackson County, Boone County, etc. But it is very possible they would prefer that because it keeps their friends, their supporters happy. To see, nobody's stealing your vote. We're counting your vote. Of course, then they'll claim that some of the people weren't really Republicans. They were Democrats claiming to be Republicans. And imagine how hard it'll be to get campaign or to get election workers who are going to be willing to sit there to go through 700,000 ballots, each with 50 items on them. Doesn't that sound like fun?
No. Sounds like tedious. Tedious work. Are there rumors of Rex Sinquefield less active now because of perhaps early Alzheimer's?
Rex has been keeping a low profile, and there was an event for the chess club that was written up in the Ladue News. Every time there's a chess club event, there's always a picture of Rex and his wife. This last event they had didn't have a picture of Rex and his wife, so something may be going on. Remember, Rex has a nice house in the city, but he also has a plantation out in Westphalia, about 25 minutes from Jeff City. My guess is if he's having health problems, he's spending a lot more time in Westphalia and a lot less time in St. Louis, where it'd be more noticeable. We'll have to see. By the way, it doesn't really matter. His wife shares his beliefs. And even though he claims he's not, I'd be willing to bet lunch money for the state of New Jersey that Rex is really a billionaire.
Really what?
Rex is a billionaire. He claims he's not, but all the evidence is that Rex Sinkfield has at least $2 billion, maybe more. So his wife can afford to bring on this legacy or continue his legacy.
Okay.
Okay, another question. Won't people be more open to the U.S. government raising revenue in view of the billions of stimulus and PPP money given out?
No. Americans do not draw a distinction between the money the government gives us and the money the government takes from us. As far as most people are concerned, the government prints money. The government doesn't need our money. The government should be giving us money. Remember, we've had the Social Security math problems for years. We've had the Medicare math problems for years. And Republicans who supposedly are fiscal conservatives haven't stood up on that. And imagine, we've seen in Missouri, even when the Republicans grudgingly supported a fuel tax increase, it went nowhere. And again, this year, we have multiple proposals. Even though Missouri is starving, we have the lowest paid state workers. We have all sorts of unmet needs. There are more proposals to cut taxes this year in Jeff City, and a lot of them are going to get a hearing. And never doubt that a tax cut is more popular in Jeff City or Washington than raising taxes, no matter what the need. And remember, George W. taught us we can fight 2 multi-trillion-dollar wars without a tax increase.
What power do the Dems in the state Senate have, especially regarding the filibuster?
Oh, Christ.
Missouri has a filibuster. However, late last session, the Republicans called the previous question, which negates the filibuster. Because the Republicans have a supermajority in the Senate, they can do that. The question will be how much Republicans want to exercise their power. There are things the Democrats can do under the rules, such as demand a reading of the previous day journal, call a lot of votes, call a lot of quorum calls. However, in the end, if the Republicans decide to rule the Missouri Senate the way they do the House, they have the votes to do previous questions. Now, Scott Sifton used to always say that PQs have consequences and they cause problems down the line. A lot's going to depend on what Mike Parson and Mike Kehoe want to get done. If they see the Democrats as obstacles, we could see a lot of previous questions. And unfortunately, we don't have the numbers to stop it. We can put a whole lot of speed bumps on the road, but they really can't stop anything. That was true too. Last year, some of those filibusters were just about making the speed bumps higher and longer.
Okay, here's another question. Who do we contact to request that Trump be removed from office via the 25th Amendment?
Mike Pence. Mike Pence is the only person who has the power to invoke the 25th Amendment on short notice. Now, Mike Pence, remember, if you mail things to Washington, because of their procedures, because of the anthrax scares and everything else, it may take 2 weeks between when you drop it in the mailbox in St. Louis and it gets to a desk in Washington. So in that case, you want to look up email addresses and phone numbers and do it that way. But Mike Pence has to be the one to invoke the 25th Amendment. Unfortunately, as of last night, as of this morning, it doesn't look like he wants to.
Okay, I believe we have one more question. What do we do about all these problems? If you know the answer to that one, I think.
Well, look down in Georgia. Stacey Abrams spent a decade rebuilding the Democratic Party in Georgia. She and a small number of activists got in there, got down to the street level, and spent years and years getting to the point where she almost won the governorship in what had been a deeply Republican state. And look what happened the other week. They laid the groundwork. So they had the people in place. They had started to move things. So now Georgia voted for Joe Biden. Georgia voted for 2 Democratic senators. But her example was kind of like Deb Lavender did with her campaign to become a state rep. Get in at the ground level, work and work and work and work, and don't give up. Stacey Abrams made sure that the African-American community was involved. She made sure that low-income people realized their needs were different than rich white people's needs. It took an awful lot of work, a lot of commitment. In Missouri, I had hoped we were going to pick up a few state rep and a couple of state Senate seats this last time, but it didn't happen. It's going to be hard in this state, and Republicans are going to make it as hard as they can. Remember, about a third of the Republican state reps became state reps by paying their filing fee. They had no primary opposition, and they had no Democratic opposition. We did have a few Democrats who got in that way too, but there's an awful lot of Republicans, especially in rural areas. So until we can start mounting serious challenges across the state and start getting people to think about what's in their own best interest, it could be that if they mess up work, if we all get to carry machine guns into Dearborns, like some are proposing, that could help us move things along, but it's not going to happen this year. If we can get modest gains in 2022, modest gains in 2024, that's all we can really hope for. It's going to take a long time and a lot of work.
Go. Go ahead.
Talking to me?
What?
Maureen pointed out something. Atlanta and Georgia in general is growing and diverse. St. Louis is not. We need to engage rural. Elad will be instrumental in that, which will be a nice segue into our speaker
it's a
today.
myth that Missouri is
Okay.
a rural state. The vast majority of Missourians live in the metropolitan areas and the I-70 corridor. In other words, you look at where the people are. It's greater St. Louis, greater Kansas City. You've got about 350,000 people now down in greater Springfield. And then we have Columbia, which is not that large of a city, but it votes with St. Louis and Kansas City more often. So, but if you look at it, probably 65% of Missouri's population and voters are in suburban and urbanized areas. It's only because of the way people think of Missouri, including suburbanites, that we think of Missouri as being a rural state.
Okay, Glenn, do you want to take some time and discuss Hawley and what's
Yes.
going on there? All right, we've got about 5 minutes.
Very quickly, when they were drafting the U.S. Constitution, they talked about having a recall mechanism for members of the House Representatives and Senators. They decided against it. A senator cannot be recalled. All discipline of a senator has to originate in the Senate. And there are 2 levels. The first is censure. For example, Joe McCarthy, after some of his more outrageous claims in the 1950s, was censured by the Senate. But they didn't take the next step, which would have been to expel him. The House and the Senate can expel a member, but they have to bring a charge. It has to be heard by the whole body, and then it takes a 2/3 vote of the body to expel a member. Only around 15 people have ever been expelled from the U.S. Senate, and about 12 of those were during the Civil War. They were Southern senators who, when their state seceded, they were kicked out. So it is theoretically possible that Ted Cruz or Hawley or some of the others could be expelled. It probably isn't going to happen because Mitch McConnell is not going to twist arms to get his Republicans. It would take 17 Republicans joining with the Democrats to expel Hawley or Cruz or anyone else. I can't see Mitch McConnell wanting that much turmoil on his own part. A censure looks bad but means nothing. A censure does not mean you lose your committee assignments, does not mean you lose your nice office. All it means is you get yelled at basically from the chair in the Senate for a couple of minutes. And it goes down in the record of the Senate. That might happen. But I would not be surprised if they just let this go away, because a lot of the Republicans, they want last week to be erased from the history books. It was embarrassing for them. It made them look bad. They're going to own it. And the more it's talked about, the more it's brought up for action. Even if it is something common sense, like bringing a Hawley or a Cruz up for sanction, isn't going to push their agenda.
Okay, we have a question relating to the senator. What percent of the Senate has to approve a charge brought against one?
2/3.
2/3.
So basically 67 senators. So you'd have to get 67 out of 100. There's a question that if you could say, have 30 senators go home and not be present for the vote, if you can lower the total number, but that'd be a parliamentary thing, which could blow up in your face. That might give a few, Republican senators, especially an out, saying, well, I didn't vote to expel Hawley or Cruz. I was on Waikiki with my family.
Okay. Glenn, thank you very much for all of this great information. Is there any recommendation you can make to people as to what they can do at this point? Where do you send the emails? Where do you make the phone calls? What do you want people to do?
We need to keep the pressure up. In other words, there are more demonstrations planned in front of Hawley's offices. If you can attend those, attend those. Send emails. Don't be afraid to send an email to Hawley. Send emails to Blunt. Send emails to Mitch McConnell. Send emails to Chuck Schumer. Basically, keep making your voice heard. The more people from Missouri who let the word get out that we are against Josh Hawley, the more it helps our cause. Yes, it's a tremendous uphill fight, but the more of us we can get out in the streets, the more of us we can get, in the newspaper and letters to the editor, the more we can get sending messages, the more chance there is that we'll be heard. Remember,
Okay.
Hawley felt he could do this because Hawley thinks Missouri wanted him to do it. Hawley is not a brave man. Hawley does what he can get by with.
All right. Thank you so much. We are going to go on to our speaker. Everyone, we want you to know that Elaine El-Toomey is a little under the weather today. She's not with us. We're going to communicate our information about the speakers coming up on our website. So please keep abreast of that for future information. All right, Karen, will you introduce our speaker?
I'd be happy to introduce my friend. He probably cringes at the idea of being one of my friends, but he is.
Absolutely not. No.
I've known Elad a while. I've known Elad before he was a candidate. He has so many irons in the fire at any given time. I'm not real sure as to how he keeps everything straight. But his official bio, currently he's working to take back Missouri. That is the name of his initiative. He has fought for better government. He is a warrior against dark money and its negative influences. I just made a comment the other day on something, relating to Roy Blunt and how much better we would be with campaign finance reform. He won a landmark Sunshine Law decision against our current Attorney General and Governor to stop the government from hiding public records. He's a really interesting Twitter follow for you too. He's been a former assistant attorney for the state of Missouri under Chris Koster. He's a criminal justice warrior also. Like I said, he's just got so many irons in the fire. He went to Duke for undergrad and WashU for law school. And he was a candidate for attorney general on the Democratic ticket, of course. last year. And I'd like to present to you Elad Gross. Yay!
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So many good faces here. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. There's actually been some news on the way in here today about dark money. Some of you may have, well, I mean, I'm sure you all were very aware of what Senator Hawley is going through right now. There were quite a few other folks in Missouri government who were very involved in pushing this lie to tell everybody so that they could empower themselves. One of those people was our Attorney General, Eric Schmidt. He spent a very long time and as much time as he possibly could trying to get on camera, especially when it came to Fox News. And he was very successful about that. He joined, well, he didn't really join. He filed legal briefs in support of lawsuits that were brought by other attorneys general against different states to delegitimize their elections that included Pennsylvania, the one that Senator Hawley made a very big deal of objecting to. Ever since this whole thing happened, our attorney general has been very quiet, but it has, I don't know if you all saw in the Post-Dispatch, but it recently came to light that a dark money group of which the our attorney general is the vice chair of, it's called the Republican Attorneys General Association, funded the event at the Capitol and put out a robocall asking people to come and to fight and to march on the Capitol. He has now since disavowed it, but you know, we used to have senators in this state who thought the buck stopped with them and elected officials who thought that, but you know, that's been a long time. But currently, I've actually been working with another attorney. His name is Mark Pedroli, who works on a lot of sunshine law cases too. And just this morning, we filed a request for any communications that he has had with the dark money group to see how much the dark money group has influenced our government already, and also to see what his involvement there was. So more news coming. The other sunshine law case has been appealed by our governor and attorney general. So I did win at the appellate court. I won again upon further review at the appellate court, and they are continuing to spend public money to prevent the public from seeing public records. So I will be arguing at Missouri Supreme Court on February 3rd, and hopefully that will settle that issue. So it might move a little bit, but right now it's set for February 3rd. So getting ready for that with a number of groups, including the ACLU, which has been super helpful, Missouri Press Association, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Kansas City Star in there too, a couple libertarian groups. So it's been a fun mix of people trying to make sure that we can, you know, hold our officials accountable. As many of you know, accountability was a very big deal for me when I was running, and before this lawsuit that I just mentioned, I've been involved in for now over 2.5 years, which predated my run for attorney general. It was one of the big drivers for it. To me, as many of you probably have heard before, but to me, it's not about just like the concept of dark money. I think it's a terrible idea where we no longer have to see who is buying our government. We don't know what in the world our government is doing and why it's doing it. To me, having done so much work before this, especially with children in St. Louis City, there is a reason why our government is not working for us. And it makes it a lot easier to not work for us when we can't see what it's doing or who's funding it. And I think we just have such terrible policies right now in our state, but also in our country as a result of these kinds of schemes. So out of the campaign, we did a whole lot of work in the campaign, and yeah, I know some folks have mentioned it before. Maureen was just talking about in the chat about going around to as many parts of the state as we possibly could. And that was a very big deal for me because I think we need to be as inclusive as possible. Part of what we did was we also worked with local candidates in their area where they normally didn't get very much support. We were able to help them with different events, organizing a lot of kind of backroom stuff where, you know, how do you set up a website, or how do I fundraise, or how do I track this and tell the MEC and not get in trouble? So we were troubleshooting that for a lot of campaigns around the state as part of what we were doing. We were also working with non-political groups on work in their own communities. Unfortunately, one of those was recently, I mean, it was just this morning they put the video out, but there was a young woman who lived in Sedalia, and she was driving to work late at night, but she had the late night shift, and on her way to work, she was pulled over by a deputy sheriff who proceeded to shoot her, and she died at the scene. The video was just released of what happened. It's pretty outrageous, but there were no charges brought, and an independent investigation was not very happy that there were no body cams or anything else, despite the fact that the Pettis County Sheriff had body cams. I was driving through Sedalia and saw a group that was protesting for Hannah, and I'd been talking about it quite a bit. Her name was Hannah Pfizer. And I stopped, talked to them, met with the family, and we were able to get actually a lot of attention on that case. This is one of the reasons why the video actually was finally released, but I've been working quite a bit with them. They did not care the politics of their sheriff. They didn't care about the politics of their governor or the attorney general. They just wanted somebody to help them, and they wanted somebody to make sure that their daughter got justice. Whether that meant that they saw the video and she was doing something wrong, or whether that meant that that officer, the law enforcement officer, was put behind bars, whatever it meant, they just wanted somebody to talk to them and tell them what was happening. And that was not happening until very recently, unfortunately. That's months later. So there are a lot of people around the state, whether they're interested in politics or not, are very interested in getting more involved in making Missouri work for all of us, especially for folks for whom this state has not worked very well for at all. So Take Back Missouri is this group that came out of that idea. It has been the continuation of a lot of work that we were doing as a campaign. And there are three main focus areas for what Take Back Missouri does. The first one is called support. That one works with current organizations, current infrastructure, candidates to help them get the support that they need to do whatever they're doing. So we've worked with a number of Democratic clubs. I just met with the club in Cedar County, which is in Southwest Missouri. I'm going to be meeting with the folks up in Hannibal. Lots of candidates so far, which is awesome that they're already ready to run in 2022. But how do we help them do better outreach, bring more people to their groups, fundraise, think about what that infrastructure looks like all the time so that our candidates, our issues are always being supported by those groups that already exist. This also can include groups like the NAACP, Missouri Faith Voices, Empower Missouri, but there are a bunch of great folks that are already doing awesome work. So how can we connect more people to what they're already doing? Okay, so that's part one. Part two is defend, and that is defending our values in the state of Missouri. Think about the Sunshine Law cases, some of the direct action issues. We're helping organize some of the protests that are happening or that will be happening very soon. Some I can't talk about, some I can. But we've been taking calls from all sorts of folks who just want to know, how can I better organize around those issues? And then obviously lawsuits are a big deal, because when folks don't want to listen to anybody else, sometimes they'll listen to their lawyers, and sometimes they have to listen to a judge before they actually do what's right for us, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So that falls underneath that middle, more active, I guess, in terms of like direct action bracket instead of more of the infrastructure piece. And then the final bucket is my favorite one, and it's called engage. And that's, how do we get new people into this process? So to me, there's kind of two main groups of those folks. There's one where we're talking about like the family of the young lady who was killed, or the group in Northwest Missouri that is protesting a CAFO from being built on land that's supposed to be in a preservation area. Or you talk about a coal ash pond near Franklin County. Folks who are really into a specific local issue, and they need help organizing around that issue. They need help figuring out, what can I do as a community? How can I get more involved? I don't really care about politics so much, but I do care about this. Now, as you all know, the more that you get involved in the community, And the more that you start talking about these issues, all of a sudden you run up on some things called laws or some bills that are being proposed or some regulations from some government entity. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, wait, I need to go to Jefferson City to talk to these people, or I need to go to my county commission to get them to do this one thing, or I need them to respond to my sunshine request. So folks who are getting involved in that way soon see how involved they need to be in our government, which is a great part, because then we take them from one bucket, we move them to the support bucket, and now they're hanging out in rooms just like this one. The other group of folks are the ones who they don't care much about anything right now. They might come to, like, oh, if you hold like a fun event or something, or like a a little fair or a festival or a concert, they might be there, and they might actually want to talk, but they're not going to reach out and say, hey, I'm going to join the Zoom meeting about this CAFO that's opening up, down the street. Or I'm not going to, go out there and write a postcard for something, even though I believe that, because a lot of folks don't think it matters. They're told to make these phone calls and they say, oh, your government is going to change and I voted in this election. But for them, on an everyday basis, not much has changed. And for many people, it's gotten worse, especially in certain areas of the state. So how do you get those people more engaged? Our belief, and actually there's a lot of research that shows this, if you're able to engage folks in ways that are outside of politics, that are more fun, that are more like those concerts or those carnivals or whatever it might be, and hopefully after the vaccine we can start having some of those again, if we can ever figure out how to give people vaccines. But once we can start doing that and getting people where they are and finding them, maybe they're on a Facebook group about, one of them that I interacted with a lot was a wrestling group on Facebook. Who knows, right? But you start talking to these people about what they care about, and all of a sudden they do start to get interested. You're going to move people up this ramp so that they're further engaged in the process. The big benefit, I think, for especially helping local organizing efforts on local issues is that all of a sudden you have people who have worked on something that everybody in town knows about. They know that guy because he helped fundraise for the animal shelter, and in Johnson County, our animal shelter is still open because that's what this group did. And then you talk to those folks and you talk to the people in the Democratic Party and you mention, hey, have you thought about running for an office? And then you connect people with a great reputation who have done really wonderful things in their community, who have helped build this whole network, who know how to take those actions that they have done, something that they have done, and put it in front of voters and say, hey, I am this person who did this. I'm asking for your vote. Instead of just, I'm the person who says this, please give me your vote. And I think that's a very big change that we can make in Missouri. I know Stacey Abrams has been mentioned quite a bit. I've done a lot of reading on her white papers and the other publications she has put out. Missouri is a very different state from Georgia. We have, we're not, they've been trending in a direction with more diversity, more diversity in political views too. Missouri, not so much. But I think something that we're really seeing in Missouri right now, and I think we've actually seen historically in Missouri, is that we are a very populous state. And part of that is because we have seen in Missouri many times that there are folks who are trying to take advantage of us and our government, and they are oftentimes not from here. They oftentimes have a whole bunch of money, like Rex Singfield. They oftentimes have a whole bunch of ideas that they want to impose on us and have no problem doing that. And I think a lot of people are really fed up with that. And I cannot tell you the number of times I've walked into a primarily Republican room and talked to them about specifically Eric Greitens and things that he did to our government, in a room full of people who totally supported that person. And when they heard about what he did and when they saw the facts in front of them, when they could ask any question that they wanted to, and they knew this guy up there was going to be very energetic for the whole 3 hours they wanted to ask him questions for, all of a sudden you started changing people's minds. And I think, Glenn, just like you said, this is a long-term project. It's something that's going to take a long time to engage people and to change some people's minds. But I think there are a lot of people who are not super excited about voting for one party or the other. They've just kind of gotten their minds that there's a default position there, and that is Republican in many communities right now. But they're not really excited about what they're hearing. And what I hear more so than anything else is they want everybody to go home. and they want to restart everybody who's in government right now. So I think there's a very big opportunity. I'm very excited about it, if you can't tell. And, we've already gotten some awesome projects off the ground now, but, it's just, we're just starting and trying to bring more people into it. We've got a group of folks who's actually doing some great research on voter registration and where are areas that we really need to target in Missouri to start swinging some, especially local elections, but even statewide ones, because our turnout in some areas really needed we needed a lot more work there. So we're trying to do a lot. I think that's right, but we're staying very focused on doing things that aren't. It's not replicating what other groups are already doing. We're trying to support what they're doing and then kind of focus on areas that have been really ignored for, I think, too long of a time. So that's the general idea.
Good for you.
All righty.
Yay. Good for you.
There's if you have a question for Elad, please put it in the chat box. Maureen pointed out, and I try to do this too. Maureen Jordan pointed out, I'm a member of many progressive Facebook groups. So many ask from time to time, how do we change Red Missouri? I always give Elad's Take Back Missouri. Elad, who in your organization start posting in these groups that you're leading this effort? I can send you the list offline.
Yeah, a list is always helpful. Anything that folks want to do is so helpful. So Maria, that would be great. We're really trying to be more facilitating the work versus just doing all, because it's impossible, right? So if you look at the website right now, you're going to see a group of folks. Some of you might be familiar with them. 7 people. There's actually a lot more volunteers than that, and we're kind of sorting through it. There was a very overwhelming response to it, which is great. But the idea is we have people who hop on Zooms like this or phone calls with local people and then advise them on how to organize locally. And sometimes, we go visit or whatever it might be, as long as we can do it safely right now. But how much support can we provide to other folks? So really, this is going to be as collaborative of an effort as possible. And as much as each individual can do, the better, like way better, awesomely better. So yeah, any groups, if you want to share things on your own, that's great. Facebook is a very, it's a very strong area in Missouri to organize on, because there are a lot of people who are on Facebook, including in rural areas. So it's a very good way to reach people. And so, yes, that is certainly a plan. And I have been adding myself to a lot of the groups, but as we get some more of these more concrete asks and events that are happening, we're going to be posting those there. And then there's some other ones too. The team, which it's a Facebook group that formed between a lot of rural candidates, and I was pretty involved in that too. But that one is going to have a lot of posting there as well. So hopefully we'll actually be setting up our own kind of Facebook group for just this. So there will be a page plus a group. The page is already there. But we're building this with all of you. So we're in the early stages right now. But yes, I think it's a great place to post. So it's a very good point.
What sunshine law litigation did you say you're currently pursuing?
Yeah. The one that's active in court right now, that is an open case, it's going to Missouri's Supreme Court in February, is one where I asked Governor Parson for records of communications between the governor's office, mostly from the time that Greitens was there, between the governor's office and 27 groups and individuals that were connected to a big dark money scheme that basically bought that election. And then not only bought that election, but then bought a lot of the priorities that came from the governor afterwards, because he had his own dark money nonprofit that he started immediately after he became governor. So I asked for those records. They refused to send them to me unless I spent $3,618 and some odd cents, 40 cents, I think, and waited at least 6 months before seeing any of them. And I thought that was wrong. They do this a lot to people who ask. I happen to be a lawyer, and I'm sitting there and I said, no, we're not going to let this happen, because they just keep doing this to people, and then people get turned away, and no one can get these records. So I filed a lawsuit. then, after asking for the Attorney General to get involved because he's supposed to enforce the Sunshine Law, he didn't. Obviously, he came in against me instead. And after several requests, when they didn't change their minds, I filed a lawsuit. So right now, the Western District Court of Appeals ruled that they cannot charge for records that are held electronically because they were charging me for an attorney to basically go through everything and redact it. There's no authorization for them to do that in the Sunshine Law. Right as the coronavirus was raging at the first time in Missouri, there was actually a push by a state representative, Mary Elizabeth Koenen, who was trying to change the Sunshine Law to respond to my lawsuit and allow us to be charged attorney's fees. I saw it and started complaining wildly because that's the law that they were going to be focused on passing during the coronavirus when no one could go and testify. So the Missouri Press Association notified me about that, and a few libertarian groups too. She called me. She tried to debate with me about how important it is to pass this right now. And I said, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Maybe with some other words in there, and told her, like, I'm going to be totally opposing this. This is absolutely ridiculous. She called me 15 minutes later and said, I'm withdrawing the bill. We're rewriting it to make it easier for people to zoom in on government and everything else. So I said, well, that's good at least. But so people still went to the Capitol at their own risk to go testify, and the bill was entirely different. There really wasn't any notice of it to the public, but at least it wasn't that. So that was defeated. The other Sunshine, there was an almost Sunshine case against the Missouri Veterans Commission. That was in the news. Jill Shoup was pretty instrumental in revealing that there was this very, very long report that the head of the commission did not want to release to the public because he thought he was going to be sued. Well, folks, in case you're ever in this position, being rich and not wanting to be sued are not excuses to violate Missouri Sunshine Law. And he said, well, sue me then. So I said, okay, I will sue you then. And the next day he revealed the report and resigned from his position. So that's usually how I like these things to end, instead of having to go to court, but they don't all end that way. And then this current one that we just sent a request this morning was about the any communications that our Attorney General has had with the Republican Attorneys General Association, which is a dark money group that helped fund the event at the Capitol. So,
Wow.
I want to know the answer to this one too. Do you have plans to run for office again?
oh, that's so sweet. Who asked that? Hi, Grace. Thank you, Grace.
Grace.
Yeah. I've had actually, I've had a lot of requests over the last few months. You know, when I ran for Attorney General, I immediately knew, like, I am just so frustrated. This has to happen. Now, I'm telling you, when I was watching what happened in the Capitol, like, I felt that same, like, it's like a panic, right? Because you learn so much about, unfortunately, we really haven't done a very good job with civic education for many years in Missouri and in the country. And a lot of folks have forgotten our history. And I'm one who reads about that stuff all the time. And I feel my heart racing right now thinking about what the heck is going on in America. And it just worries me so much to see these people who are elected officials who, without shame, just take advantage of us all the time and look right into the camera like Josh Hawley did the night after this whole thing happened and absolutely lie to us because he wants a book deal and one day he wants to be president of the United States of America. And, you hear these like words and the hardest question I get is, well, you're saying all of these great things. How am I supposed to believe you? And it's like, that's the point that we're at now, where it just, folks can just lie straight to your face and pretend like they're a senator in the same state where Harry Truman was. It frustrates me to no end. So I think the answer to that is probably a yes. And I really appreciate that. But, I've always thought, are there folks who I can help be in that position to succeed? And that's been something that's really been a passion of mine. And so, at the time, I just, there was an office that I really cared about and really wanted to make a change in. And, the policy platform got a little bit bigger than that. I was really hoping that Nicole would run for Senate. Now I've talked to Nicole, and I can understand why not. It was very depressing, and she's just such a wonderful public servant, and this state did not do her a service. I mean, as like for people for the longest time before I was running for everything, I mean, I thought the world of the work that she was doing as our state auditor. And I mean, she's got a website. I wish they put this out in the campaign more. There's a website there's a page on her website that shows all of the places that she has like brought cases or returned millions of dollars that she has brought back to our state from these scammers. And it's just, but you know, I understand. And honestly, she's a wonderful auditor. So I really am going to work as hard as I can to make sure she stays that way. But yeah, I mean, a lot of folks have been talking to me. So if you've got any ideas, I'm happy to hear them. But you know, I have been working with a lot of other candidates too. So I'm trying to take it day by day and figure out what the heck is going on, just like the rest of the country is right now. But thank you. That's really nice of you. That's really nice of you to say.
Okay, let's see here. Don't you think we have Trump to thank for the lying pandemic?
For the pandemic and the lying pandemic, I think. Yeah, I think both. Yeah, you know, I try to give people credit where it's due. And at the time, I thought that the plan that Trump had for the first pandemic, for the actual pandemic to have the vaccines produced, even if they didn't know if they were going to work or not, because then you have a whole bunch of them and you're ready to get them out the door when the first one gets approved and go, what, like, great idea. And members of Congress on both sides were like, look, we agree with this. But then he had zero plan to actually distribute the vaccine. I mean, what in the world, like for smallpox, now everybody's talking about it, but like for smallpox and for polio, like we were able to do better than we're able to do now in 2021. What in the world has happened? So, yeah, that's a problem. The lying pandemic, I agree. I think part of it. So, okay. So for populist movements in general, because I'm really worried right now that the term is going to get, the idea behind it is going to get a bad name, because corporations right now, I know a lot of folks are celebrating on the Democratic side. Oh, look at this corporation. They're not going to fund Republicans anymore. It's like they shouldn't be funding anybody at all. Like they should not be buying our government, period. I don't care who you are. They shouldn't be here. But that's like the problem. Like we keep like, oh, we're playing sides and all of this. And we've lost this sense of integrity for our democracy as a whole. And Trump really played on that. Like he played on that. He did what so many populists do. Populists, and this is a fake populist. They take advantage of people who are hurting. And they make all of these promises and they make all of these statements. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to do this for you. And then they get there. And the only thing that they can think about is, what can I do for me? And I really, you know, I think Trump is one thing. What Josh Hawley was trying to do scares the crap out of me, because that guy absolutely shamelessly would pretend like, look, I'm super smart. I know what I'm doing. And let me tell you, this First Amendment says this, or let me tell you, Pennsylvania was wrong about that. And it's just, oh my goodness. So yeah, I think Trump was part of that. I don't think somebody like Trump gets to succeed that way unless our system has some serious failures in it. And Jason Kander has mentioned this quite a few times. You know, he says every 30 years or so, we make some major change to our democracy, our electoral process, our system, because we need to. Like over time, it kind of weakens and then folks take advantage and then we need to change it. And he's been saying for a few years that he thinks it's time for some major change. And, you know, maybe we have to bottom out first. But I think we need some serious changes to preserve the integrity of what America can be and what it has been. And I you know, we're at a flashpoint. So maybe we'll get to one day look back at this and say Donald Trump exposed all of these problems in a very accelerated way, and we came together as a country and said, oh, we're going to fix all of these things. And that's my optimistic view. Hopefully we don't have to go through more of this crap, but you know, if we do, we just have to keep fighting. That's our job.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
have a
Go ahead,
question.
Karen.
I don't know if we have
Go
any-
ahead, Karen.
I said, I don't think we have any additional questions for Elad.
Okay. Well, Elad, we can't thank you enough. This
Thank you.
was fun, interesting, and we want to be there for you. West County Democrats is not a group that endorses candidates or helps financially, but we have all kinds of members who are wonderful people who will help. So be sure to keep in contact with us. Let us know all of your plans, and we'll be there. If you want to go, we're behind you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very nice. Yeah, if anybody's got ideas, or if you need help, or you know somebody, sometimes it's a family member who's over in Pemiscot County who's like, oh, we can flip this guy, just let me know. I'll call him. So anything you need, I'm here for.
Tell people your website again.
Oh yeah, I'll put it in the chat. It's Take Back Missouri or takebackmo.org. All of it will get you there. .com will work too, just in case you forget.
I put it in the chat. I thought it would be nice if you were to voice it.
Yeah, put it there. It is. There it is. Now it's clickable and everything. I'll put my
Okay.
contact
Thank
information
you.
in there too.
Excellent. Well, that's way
Wonderful.
better than I did. Okay.
Okay. All right. We want to thank you all for coming, and we will see you next month,
February 8th.
February 8th. Thank you.
Take care.